Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Welcome back. In lecture 52, we will talk about natural methods of sewage treatment. So, the different concepts that we will cover are on treatment by dilution, self-purification process, the factors affecting self-purification process, 4 zones undergoing self-purification process along streams, oxygen balance, disposal in sea. Then we will talk about land treatment, types of land treatment, and then finally on sewage farming. So, that when we talk about natural treatment, that means we are actually disposing the sewage to the environment, either it could be land or it could be water, and the processes that actually that means if automatically the sewage would be acted upon by the microorganisms which are there on water or which are there on land, and some amount of this decomposition will take place via these microorganisms, and also because some amount of sedimentation happens in the water bodies, and then gradually this sewage actually is spread out by the currents. So, all these things are more or less treat the sewage, and the water wherever we put in the sewage, gradually it gets treated over a particular distance, and we see that the water quality is returned back to normal. So, that is why we can treat sewage by dilution. That is nothing but disposal of sewage or discharge of sewage into water bodies. So, only thing is we should not put in more sewage than that particular water body can take. So, that is the idea. So, putting sewage into water body, and that will actually dilute the sewage, and the total amount of and over time this particular sewage would be acted upon by microorganisms and all, and the organic matter would be decomposed and returned back to its natural state. But we shouldn't put in too much of sewage, so that it will create unnecessary pollution in certain stretches of the water body. So, in this particular stretches, we should make sure that the water should not be unfit for bathing, drinking and fish culture and so on. So, the quantity of sewage has to be controlled. So, usually we dispose the sewage into water. Of course, if the city is near a big lake or a river or sea, that is only then we can dispose sewage into a river or into a water body. And sewage at point of disposal should be fresh and non-septic. That means the sewage should not have undergone decomposition before that. So, it should be relatively the disposal point. The travel time between the origin and the disposal point should be less, so that the sewage remains relatively fresh and non-septic, and the point of disposal depth should be sufficient. If it is not sufficient, then it will create this sludge banks, or that means that if the depth is not sufficient, or if the current is not there at all, then it will result in deposition of the sewage, and then you will form sludge banks, right. So, the volume of water should be adequate, so that there is no pollution, and there should not be any backflow to the sewer during flood, so that the level of the outfall should be high, and no destruction of aquatic life, and sludge banks should not be formed. Like if we were talking about, if the current is not there, or if we dump too much of sewage, then sludge banks can be formed. Now, as we were discussing in our earlier lecture, that most of the sewage in India is not treated. We just put untreated sewage into the water bodies, but the National Green Tribunal actually looks into that, and most of the urban local bodies are mandated to treat sewage. And as you can see in this particular image, this is an image from Mumbai. This is where BMC, was fined rupees 34 crores for letting untreated sewage into the sea, and this National Green Tribunal orders BMC to pay 4.25 crore a month for 85 major outfalls. So that means that this Mumbai has got around 85 major outfalls, and for that they have to pay a fine because they are not treating the sewage. So as you can see, this money could have gone into setting up a sewage treatment plant. So that is how we should look at this particular problem. So how it is possible that the sewage, if it is dumped into the river, automatically it gets treated? So it gets treated via the self-purification processes of rivers or the streams. So what happens, the location where we put in sewage, of course that area is of not, there it's better to not use the water over there, but gradually as you move downstream or successively downstream, the quality of water changes, and you will find that the quality of water has improved and that water becomes usable. And this near the outfall or the point of disposal, you will see that the suspended solids in the polluted water gradually gets deposited in the stream beds in layers, and that depends of course on the current of that particular stream, or if the current is too much, then the water, then the sewage is taken further away. If the current is moderate, then it's uniformly spread over a certain distance, and that is actually what is desired. And organic matters decompose with time, and they are and they are washed away, and then they are broken down into simple constituents, and then that is actually stabilization of organic matter, or we can say the organic matter is treated. So, and that means the BOD would be reduced for that particular organic matter. That means all the organic matter would be consumed by the microorganisms, and only simpler matters would be left out. And in addition to that, nitrogen, sulfur, carbon is also there in sewage, and other inorganic matter is there. They also get treated by their own natural cycles. So the nitrogen cycle, carbon cycle, you have already read about these things maybe in your plus 2's class standards, and then you can see those also are acted upon by various environmental different is acted upon by the environment, maybe by light, maybe by oxygen, and then gradually they also break down. So this algae and other microscopic organisms eat also this mineralized food, this broken down matter, and they supply oxygen, leading to further aerobic conditions, which leads to further decomposition. And bacteria eaten by protozoa, which is again eaten by fish. So there is a complete cycle in that regards. And bacteria act as on organic material and convert it to simpler minerals and other matter, and algae absorb CO2 and supply oxygen. So it's a codependent process, you can say. So there are several factors which affect the self-purification process. So that means we were already talking about factors like dilution, factors like current. That means if the sewage is mixed with large volume of water, that results in aerobic conditions. So we want, of course, the sewage to be as diluted as possible. We talked about current. If there is no current, it results in formation of sludge banks and bad odor, because anaerobic condition starts, and that's why H2S gas is formed. That's why we have these foul odors. And so some amount of slow current is better, as it leads to sedimentation and algae production, and which again leads to generation of oxygen and aerobic decomposition process. So then sedimentation, current and sedimentation is related, of course. Slow current leads to deposition of heavy solids, leading to anaerobic decomposition, and products mix with current, and if dilution is sufficient, anaerobic conditions are not developed. So that means either if spreads over a large area, then it mixes with the current, then anaerobic decomposition doesn't happen, because we don't have different layers of higher depths of this sewage, which is dumped on the lower levels, right. So then we have temperature. At low temperature, organic activities are slow. So in higher temperatures, the organic activities are higher. So in Indian condition, we have very good this kind of decomposition taking place, because we have higher temperature. Same is the sunlight. Sunlight, if more sunlight is present, then the decomposition rate is higher, and more pathogens are killed when they are exposed to sunlight. And then we have got oxidation and the reduction processes. As you know that aerobic processes use oxidation, and this So total oxidation of the organic matter happens, and that actually leads to breaking down of those matter. And in reduction occurs due to hydrolysis of organic matter by anaerobic organisms. That means they take away the water from that particular organic matter, and then that actually breaks down that particular matter. So hydrolysis is where, in this particular case, we are taking the oxygen from the matter itself, whereas in case of oxidation we are adding oxygen from atmosphere, which is helping in the decomposition process. So in a river body, where from the point where the sewage is deposited, which is the outfall, and to the point where we find that the water has returned to a condition of relatively pure state, there we can divide this entire area into 4 zones. And the first zone is the degradation zone, and you can see that this is near the outfall of sewage, and water color is usually turbid with dark color. Of course, the sewage is dark. So that's why the water also becomes turbid and dark, and anaerobic decomposition of solid matters prevails. So in this area you will see mostly anaerobic decomposition, because whatever we do, there would be some amount of sludge bank, some amount of deposition, because it's the point of outfall. And you can see that in this particular table we have the same thing is shown, that first of all, what is the condition of oxygen in that water, how much amount of oxygen is there, saturated oxygen. So you see that at the first, of course, clear water, that means no sewage is there, so saturation level is 100%, and actual values of oxygen is around 40% is the saturation rate. So but that means that 100% oxygen saturation rate is there. Then at zone of degradation you see the oxygen level going down, and then zone of active decomposition, it is the least, and then gradually it improves and then reaches the value of 40% again at the zone of recovery, and then we have the clear water zone. So these are the 4 zones: degradation zone, active decomposition zone, recovery zone, and the clear water zone. Now what happens in the zone of degradation? You can see that sludge is present, color getting turbid. You can see fish, not all fish are there, only tolerant fish species are there, like carp, buffalo, etc. are present, and you can see certain kinds of bottom animals and certain kinds of algae and protozoa. So not all fishes could be present in this particular region. Then comes the active decomposition zone, where water becomes greyish in color with odors of hydrogen sulfide, and scum may be also seen on the surface. So this is the area where the most decomposition is taking place, and you can see that DO level has gone to the lowest level possible. Probably this is the critical level, that is the maximum amount of the lowest level of oxygen in the water, and this leads to creation of these gases because of anaerobic processes, CH4 gas, CO2 gas, H2S gas, some aerobic, some anaerobic process, both happens, and and you will see that almost no fish are present over here, and some amount of bottom animals, some amount of algae, protozoa also could be found over here. Then we gradually see recovery is happening. That means the organic matter is getting stabilized, that is already the food is being consumed by those microbes and all, and then BOD value is reduced, dissolved oxygen becomes more than 40% of saturated value. So that means that it returns to the normal condition, and bacteria decreases at food supply decreases. So that means because there is no more further organic matter, so bacterial population also decreases, and we can see that fishes are also starts appearing in this particular zone. And then finally we can see the clear water zone, where the stream attains the normal condition. There is no sludge at the bottom, there is no color, is not different, all fishes are present, and everything else comes back to the normal position. So to see the oxygen balance in this particular distance, so either this time we can plot it in a chart, where on this axis we have got the time or the day, that is time of for the water to travel a particular distance, right? It's time for the water to travel a particular distance, or we can just take downstream distance as well. Whichever you feel convenient, you can tell. I just draw two graphs for that. So over here you can see this is the normal oxygen addition rate. So this blue line, right? So this is cumulative oxygen addition, and slope of the line is RR, or there is a slope or at a rate at which oxygen gets added. Similarly, this is the cumulative oxygen depletion, and then it has also got a slope. So, this is the rate of depletion of oxygen, that is consumption of oxygen by bacteria, and this is the resulting amount of oxygen. So, we have got gradually we are reducing the consumption of oxygen, and we are gradually the oxygen addition is at a certain rate. So, we can see that at one point this dissolved oxygen value comes down, and then it reaches the critical point dC, and the time or the distance is Tc for this, and then gradually it gets there, all these reactions happen over there, and then gradually it again returns back, because we are keeping on addition, we are keeping oxygen gradually gets added, and the dissolved oxygen returns back to this normal position over here, right. So, that is this dissolved oxygen, or the SAC, this is called the SAC curve, right. So, DO SAC curve. So, dissolved oxygen SAC curve, and this is the BOD curve, right. So, cumulative oxygen depletion is basically the BOD curve. So, this is gradually the BOD stabilizes, and you will see that no further reduction, and then the oxygen keeps on getting added upon at a certain rate, and we will see that the stream will return to its normal condition. So, this is the in normal condition, this is the DO concentration is at this particular level, which is CS level. So, eventually it will reach the this CS level, so which is 40%, and that is the maximum amount of oxygen that could be there in water. So, so this is how the overall this cell purification process happens, but this is primarily for the water bodies or the streams or the lakes, but we can also dispose sewage in the sea, particularly in many cases the urban areas which are around which are at the bank or at the shores of a sea. There the only option, and then there are no rivers and all, and the only option is to dispose the sewage in the sea, right. But the fundamental difference between sea water and the normal stream water is that the temperature of sea water is lower, and also the specific gravity is also higher compared to normal streams. Now, why it is higher? Because of the presence of salt and other minerals in the sea water, the specific gravity is much higher than the normal water. And because of this, you will see that sewage mostly remains on the surface, and it forms a thin film on the surface. So, whatever sewage is disposed, it will form a thin film on the surface of the sea, because it cannot go down because of higher specific gravity of the water. So, because of the presence of various salts, various minerals in the sea water itself, there are various chemical action takes place, and the prevailing dissolved matter reduce the capacity to absorb more sewage. So, this is another problem. That means that the amount of because of the presence of all this chemical action and all these things, the capacity the sewage is takes a lot of time to actually decompose in seawater, and that is why you will find that the sewage appears as a precipitate of milky color and forms sludge banks, and these sludge banks generate hydrogen sulfide, and lot of this comes you will find generated at the surface, and you will see that in many cases you will see this kind of white froth on that or precipitate which develops, and which eventually is brought back by the waves to the seashores, right. So, dissolved oxygen in seawater is 20% less than the stream water. So, that means the dissolved oxygen levels are also lower. So, decomposition takes much higher time, and that is why we and because this forms a precipitate and this comes back to the surface, we usually need to dispose this sewage much into the inside of the sea. That means we have to take the pipelines sufficiently inside, for example, up till maybe 1.5 kilometers, so that the sewage does not come back to the shore. So, compared to normal water, the decomposition takes much time. The sewage floats on the surface, it forms a film, it forms a precipitate, it forms this froth, and then the waves bring it back to the shore. So, it is not desirable. So, that is why we we actually put the sewage much inside into the, we take pipelines in almost like 1.5 kilometers into the sea, and then only we let the sewage out. Now, that we have talked about dilution, which is both treatment at sea or treatment at a water body, we can also talk about land treatment. and this is another natural method of treating sewage. And the process that is involves is the sewage is actually spread over a large volume of land, large surface area, land surface area, and that what it uses the principle that the soil has got pores, the organic matter or the larger particles or the suspended matter will get trapped in those pores, whereas the water will gradually filter down. And once the water percolates, the organic solids will remain on the surface, and these organic solids will be acted upon by bacteria, which is naturally present in the soil, and also partly oxidized by the atmospheric action of heat, light, oxygen, and so on, right. So, that means the matter will get oxidized as well as acted upon by bacteria, and usually it converts into harmless mineral salts, which which can act as a fertilizer. So, that means this kind of treatment is actually good for the soil itself in certain cases. So, this table actually shows you the rate at which we can apply sewage on the soil surface. That is, for different kinds of soil surface, you can understand the porosity is different. Like clay soils have got a lot less porosity compared to this loamy soil, and sandy soils of course are higher than clay soils. And you can see that the raw sewage application for sandy soil is around 120 to 150 cubic meter per hectare per day, whereas this is the maximum value that could be put, so that there is no flooding, there is no the pores doesn't get clogged, and all these issues can be prevented. And if we use settled sewage, that means instead of using raw sewage, if we use settled sewage, that means already the sewage could be put through a stabilization pond or a sedimentation tank, where some amount of sedimentation has happened, and we take the the rest of the sewage, then we can apply more quantity of sewage, because this has got less amount of solid and there is less chance of pores getting clogged. So, in this case the settled sewage is 225 to 280 cubic meter per hectare per day. So, which is much more in sandy soil of course. In clay soil both the figures are lesser, like 30 to 35 for raw sewage and 33 to 55 for this settled sewage. So, depending on the type of soil or the nature of the soil, we have to adjust the rate of application of sewage. So, what are the advantages of land treatment? This is of course disposal by natural treatment. We are not spending any money on artificial treatment processes, setting up a sewage treatment plant. The second benefit is there is no pollution of water. So, pollution of water is not there, and also the third benefit is fertilizers are produced, which could be good use for vegetable growth or whatever crops you are planting. But there are several disadvantages as well. That means you require a large amount of area. So, you understand the application rate. So many meter cube per hectare per day. So, if you just divide it by the total quantity of sewage required that has to be disposed of, you will see that the total land area or the spread is pretty high, and so large amount of land area is required. And during rainy season you can understand there is lot of rainfall, and this entire process becomes ineffective because more rainfall falls and the sewage that usually percolates to the ground, and now we have got so much rainwater. So, the entire process is not actually effective in this particular case, and in that case also, because of this extra runoff water or the rainwater, this will actually spread the sewage in further area and it may cause diseases. And if in case we apply too much of sewage even in non-rainy season in a particular area, then the land becomes sick. So, that means the pores of the soil will get clogged and there is anaerobic conditions will persist over there, and overall land will become sick. There is not possible no decomposition, no mineral matter, no fertilizer. So, more or less it will actually reduce plant growth. So, usually this kind of land treatment is good for areas with low rainfall, and water table is also at a much higher lower depth, because the percolating water, the sewage actually will otherwise mix with the groundwater, and this kind of sewage, this kind of treatment is good for vegetable growth particularly. So, there are different types of land treatment. So, this is a slow rate wastewater treatment system. So, it is just simple application of sewage on the surface, and you will see that either we can put some under drainage over here, or it could be just a normal process in which water goes down and then and without any under drainage, and eventually it goes and mixes with the groundwater. If the groundwater table is much lower, it gets filtered down, and we usually the water that goes into the groundwater is relatively pure. So, we can have under drainage system. That means that water, when it comes down, it comes to impervious surface. Excess water can enter into this particular pipeline. These are pipeline with pores, and the water gets drained to a particular disposal point, right. So, that this water gets taken to a drain or to a water body maybe. Or it could, if the land is sloped towards a water body like that, the water, the sewage can percolate down and then move along through the soil and then get into the water body as well. So, this is a slow rate wastewater treatment. This is a natural way, just you apply the sewage and that is it. So, this is a biological treatment process where wastewater is treated as it flows over vegetated surface to runoff collection ditches. So, that means some amount of sewage goes down, some amount of sewage is through, you are putting the sewage via certain vegetation, and this vegetation actually acts upon the sewage. So, some amount of absorption is done by the plants, then there is evapotranspiration, and then the water actually goes down, and overall some amount of these pores, because the sewage is trapped on the pores there, they become fertilizer, that actually helps the plant. So, this is a biological treatment process. So, in this one, even though the image shows plant, that is actually of not too much of concern, but in the other case we actually use plants for this treatment. So, in this particular case you can see there are several these circles, and these are like areas where we can have we spray the sewage using sprinklers or fans, and then we provide ditches where these usually are at a higher level, and the sewage flows down to the ditches, and eventually this actually increases the surface area over which the sewage is sprayed, and then eventually it flows over the surface and goes to the ditches, and then goes to the disposal point, which may be a water body. So, that means this actually facilitates part of the treatment process. So, as this is this process is known as overland flow wastewater treatment system. That means we allow the wastewater to flow over land, and that actually results in some percolation, some amount of catching of the solids in the pores of the soil, which actually is a natural way of treating the and the organic matter actually normally gets naturally stabilized, and the rest of the excess water will go into the ditches, which eventually is disposed of in a stream or a water body. Then finally, we can have also design rapid filtration systems instead of a slow rate wastewater system, where we design the systems where we actually do these ditches, and you can see we store the sewage so that it percolates. And why it is rapid? Because you see you are creating a head. So, we have learned this in case of certain, we will learn this again later on. Whenever we create a detention basin or a retention basin, or any kind of percolation pit, then what happens? That means the water head that is available, that puts pressure, that actually helps in making the water go down faster, right. So, this head of water, or this water that is present over in this particular ditch, actually pushes the water below the ground as well. So, this is a rapid infiltration system, and you can see different variations of it. So, we create these ditches, and then we have this under drainage system, or we may not have under drainage system, and we can actually recharge underground aquifer using these techniques, and surface water sources using under drains or wells. So, this can take the water to the surface water sources as well. So, relatively clean water, because the water has already gone through the ground, it has been treated to some extent, and this is applied to moderately and highly permeable soil, and in basins, or we can also use sprinklers as well, and vegetation is not used. So, that means there is potential to use this sewage in land for sewage farming, and that means it helps us in growing crops, and the land of course acts as a filter, and this is where it filters the water, and the under drainage system is laid to collect the effluents, and we actually have 15 centimeter porous pipes laid open jointed at spacings of 10 to 30 meters. So, that means every 10 to 30 meters we can have this open jointed porous pipes through which the water gets in, and then the water is taken to a disposal point. And mineral salts of sewage such as nitrates, sulfates, phosphates are the main fertilizing constituents which are actually helps in growth of this particular vegetables or other crops. But if we apply too much of sewage, it leads to sewage sickness, and that means the pores continuously decrease and soil gets clogged by deposition of solids. Air cannot circulate, anaerobic conditions starts, and this leads to production of hydrogen sulfide. So, this we just discussed in the earlier slide as well. So, how we can prevent this? We can prevent this by obviously applying less quantum of sewage, right. So, sewage is applied, also we can apply the sewage after primary treatment, that means some amount of settling is done, and we remove some of the suspended solids, or we reduce the suspended solid load of this particular sewage. And then we can also do intermittent application, and we can do thorough plying to change the soil. That means we can not change, means we can bring the lower soil above, and the upper soil goes down. And then we can also plant different kind of crops in rotation, so that each crops require different kind of mineral matter, and then also by providing an under drainage system for the water to pass out. So, all these things can actually prevent sewage prevent sewage sickness of the particular soil. So, we reduce the volume of water, we reduce the suspended solid load of the sewage, and we reduce the total sewage load or the suspended solid load of the sewage, and we can do intermittent plowing and planting of crops in rotation, and so on. So, there are different techniques of sewage farming. The first is surface irrigation, where parallel drainage lines are constructed according to the slope, and sewage flows over land surface from one drain to another. So, that means this is one drain, it flows over the land surface. There may be ridges like this, but there may not be, and this goes, and then there is another sewage drain over here where the sewage falls, and from there again it flows. So, in this way it actually floods the entire area. Then subsoil irrigation, that means we do not apply the sewage at the top. In this particular case, we apply the sewage on the surface, but in this particular case, we apply the sewage via under drainage or a pipe below the ground, that is 30 centimeter below. These are porous pipes, and the sewage spreads from this particular pipe, and that actually is, this sewage flows are absorbed by the subsoil, and that is that actually provides the fertilizers for this particular plants to grow, and also provides the water as well. And flooding, finally this is flooding, where we just fill this, we create this sort of ridges and furrows, or this dikes. These are the dikes, the raised portion of the soil, and we plant the crops in between the dikes, and we can flood this particular this dikes with this sewage, which is almost similar to over here, where here the sewage continuously flows, but here it is stagnated. So, sewage is filled in ponds in between dikes. Depths vary from few centimeters to 50 centimeters, depending on the soil type, depending on if under drainage system is there or not. So, we can put in both under drainage system, and depending on the soil, we can apply more amount of sewage. Then is regen furrows, which is similar to the previous one. Only thing is we plant the crops on the ridges. So, that means the sewage, this ponding takes place, the sewage is actually applied in these ponds, the sewage gets percolated, the soil surfaces gets the fertilizer, and the plants can take it, but the plants are not in the sewage itself. So, land plowed deep into 30 centimeter, leveled into plots and subplots, plots enclosed by dikes forming ridges and furrows in subplot. Then we have got spray irrigation, where sewage is filled into tanks where the solids settle and is sprayed over land. So, the solid is this sewage that we are spraying is more or less the cleaner effluent part after some amount of settlement in this tanks from where it could be sprayed. And then finally, we have got lagooning, where the sludge is allowed to go into a watertight pond, and it is detained for certain amount of time, and the sludge gets stabilized during this time, and it is dried, and then this is not directly sewage farming, but when you do lagooning, that means you can utilize both the the dried sewage, which becomes more or less a fertilizer, or the stabilized sewage, which becomes fertilizer, into farming as well. So, these are the different techniques of sewage farming that we can actually adopt. So, to conclude, in natural sewage treatment, sewage can be treated through dilution or via application on land surface, and self purification process of water bodies are utilized for sewage treatment via dilution, and land treatment process can be planned and designed to integrate sewage farming. These are the references that you can use. Thank you.